I never imagined that a simple household appliance would become the catalyst that unraveled everything. It was a Saturday morning in early November, the kind of crisp autumn day that makes Minneapolis beautiful, and I'd just returned from Best Buy carrying a brand new Shark vacuum cleaner. Not the most expensive model they had, mind you, but a quality one. $379 to be precise. I'd been eyeing it for weeks, ever since my ancient Bissell had finally wheezed its last breath after 25 years of faithful service. I was in my kitchen, carefully breaking down the cardboard packaging, when my son Marcus walked in through the side door. He's 39 years old now, works in corporate finance downtown, drives a Mercedes that he leases for more money than most people spend on their entire monthly housing costs. He took one look at the vacuum cleaner still half wrapped in protective plastic, and his face did something I'd never witnessed before. A peculiar kind of twitch around his mouth, his jaw tightening. Disapproval mixed with something sharper, something that felt almost like anger. "Mom," he said, his voice carrying an edge as he picked up the receipt I'd carelessly left on the granite counter. $380 for a vacuum cleaner? $379, I corrected him automatically, which was foolish perhaps, but somehow the precision felt important to me in that moment. He laughed, but there wasn't a trace of humor in the sound. It was dry, almost mocking. "You're 74 years old. Why are you spending money like this?" I looked at him. Really looked at him. This was my son, the boy I'd raised entirely on my own after his father died when Marcus was only 8 years old. The child I'd put through college by working double and sometimes triple shifts as a hospital administrator, saying no to promotions that would have meant relocating, sacrificing my own advancement for his stability. The man who now earned more in a single year than I'd made in 5. "Because my old one broke," I said simply, keeping my voice even. "And I need to vacuum my house." "You could have gotten one for $60 at Walmart," he said, and now he was pacing, moving back and forth across my kitchen floor in that particular way he has when he's working himself up to something important. "You need to start thinking about the future, Mom. Medical expenses, assisted living facilities, long-term care insurance, these things accumulate. They add up faster than you think." "I'm not in assisted living, Marcus," I said quietly. "I'm in my own house, vacuuming my own floors." "That's not the point." He set the receipt down with considerably more force than necessary, and I watched it flutter slightly on the counter. "The point is, you're being irresponsible with money that's supposed to last you. That has to last you. Supposed to last me. As if I were a child with a weekly allowance who didn't understand budgeting." "It's my money," I said, and I could hear my voice getting quieter, the way it does when I'm trying very hard to maintain control. "Is it?" He turned to face me fully now, his arms crossed over his chest. "Dad's life insurance, your retirement savings, your pension. That's not just your money, Mom. That's family money. When you're gone, that's supposed to help me and Lauren take care of things. Help with the kids' college funds. Help us plan for our own future. You can't just blow through it on things you don't actually need." I felt something crack open inside my chest. Not break. Crack, like ice on a frozen lake when the temperature shifts just enough, when pressure builds beneath the surface. That kind of crack. "I see," I said. He must have heard something change in my voice because his expression softened fractionally, just enough to show he recognized he crossed some line he hadn't quite meant to cross. "I'm not trying to be harsh," he said, moderating his tone. "I'm trying to look out for you. Look out for all of us. You worked incredibly hard for that money, Mom. You should be more careful with it, more strategic." After he left, I sat at my kitchen table for nearly 3 hours. I didn't cry, didn't call anyone, didn't turn on the television or the radio. I just sat there in the gradually changing light, thinking about every single choice I'd made over the past 43 years. When Marcus was 11 years old, I turned down a significant promotion that would have required relocating our family to Chicago. The salary increase would have been substantial. 30% more, plus better benefits, plus a clear path to senior leadership. But Marcus was struggling after his father's death, just beginning to find his footing again, and I couldn't bear the thought of uprooting him from his school, his friends, the stability we'd finally managed to build. So I stayed in Minneapolis in the same position for 8 more years. When Marcus was in college, I drove a 17-year-old Honda Accord with a broken air conditioning system and a passenger door that wouldn't open from the outside. I drove that car for 4 years because I wanted to make absolutely certain Marcus graduated without a single dollar of student loan debt. He did graduate debt-free. Magna cum laude, in fact. When Marcus got married 6 years ago, I paid for half the wedding, $29,000. Lauren's parents covered the other half, and they earned considerably more than I did, had considerably more disposable income. But I didn't mind, didn't even think twice about it. I wanted Marcus to have the wedding he and Lauren had dreamed about, the celebration they'd planned. I had never, not once in my entire adult life, bought myself anything that could reasonably be called frivolous or extravagant. I clipped coupons from the Sunday newspaper. I bought generic brands at the grocery store. I shopped clearance racks and end-of-season sales. I drove my cars until they literally would not start anymore, until mechanics told me repairs would cost more than the vehicle was worth. And I'd saved. Carefully, deliberately, consistently over more than 4 decades of disciplined financial management. My husband's life insurance payout, my pension from the hospital, my 401k that I'd contributed to even when money was impossibly tight, my Social Security benefits. All of it carefully managed, carefully invested, carefully grown over time. I walked to my home office and pulled out my laptop, logging into my financial accounts. I hadn't checked them in several months. I didn't need to check them frequently, didn't obsess over daily market fluctuations. I knew approximately what was there, had a general sense of my financial position. Except I didn't actually know, not really, because what was there was significantly more than I'd realized. Considerably more. The market had been extraordinarily good to me over the past decade. And my financial advisor, a sharp woman named Victoria, who I'd been working with for 17 years, had been very, very good to me. Her investment strategies had been conservative but smart, balancing growth with security. Between everything, my retirement accounts, my investment portfolio, my pension fund, my savings, I had just over $2.6 million in liquid assets, plus my house, which was completely paid off and worth approximately $650,000 in the current market, $3.2 million, give or take, and my son, my only child, had just lectured me about a vacuum cleaner. I sat there staring at those numbers on my computer screen, and I felt something fundamental shift inside me. Not anger, not yet. Something colder than anger. Something clearer and more focused. I called Victoria first thing Monday morning. "Eleanor," she said warmly when she picked up, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "How are you?" "It's been a while." "I'm well, Victoria. I need to talk to you about making some significant changes." We met for lunch on Wednesday at a restaurant in downtown Minneapolis, one of those places with exposed brick and Edison bulbs, and a menu that changes seasonally. Victoria was 62, always impeccably dressed in tailored suits, and she never wasted time with unnecessary small talk. "What are you thinking?" she asked once we'd ordered. I told her everything, about Marcus, about the vacuum cleaner, about the look on his face and the words he'd used, about family money and being irresponsible, and how I was supposed to preserve my assets for after I was gone. Victoria's expression remained professionally neutral throughout my story, but something flickered in her eyes. Recognition, maybe, or perhaps just understanding born from years of working with clients navigating complex family dynamics around money. "What do you want to do?" she asked when I finished. "I want to know what my options are," I said carefully. "Realistically, if I wanted to make a point about whose money this actually is." Victoria smiled, and it wasn't a particularly kind smile. It was sharp, knowing, almost predatory. "Professionally speaking, Eleanor, you have very considerable assets. You could make quite a substantial point if you chose to." We talked for nearly 3 hours, ordering more coffee, pushing our plates aside, leaning in over spreadsheets and projections that Victoria pulled up on her tablet. She showed me scenarios, possibilities, options I'd never even considered. Financial strategies that ranged from conservative to aggressive, from subtle to absolutely unmistakable. By the time lunch ended and we walked out into the cold November afternoon, I had a plan. A clear, detailed, carefully structured plan. The first step was actually the easiest part. I called my attorney, Robert, who'd handled my will and my husband's estate and various other legal matters over the years. I told him I wanted to make some significant changes to my estate planning. We met the following Tuesday in his downtown office, all dark wood and leather chairs and framed diplomas. "I want to establish a charitable foundation," I said once we'd settled in, "to be funded primarily from my estate after I'm gone." Robert nodded, already taking notes on his legal pad. "What kind of foundation are you envisioning?" "Scholarships," I said, "for single parents pursuing higher education, specifically within Minnesota. People trying to build better futures for themselves and their children while working and raising kids alone." "That's admirable, Eleanor. Very admirable. How much are you thinking of allocating?" $2.2 million. His pen stopped moving across the paper. He looked up at me, his expression carefully neutral, but his eyes slightly widened. $2.2 million to the foundation," I continued calmly. "The house and the remainder of my liquid assets to Marcus, which should work out to approximately $900,000 once everything's settled and distributed." "That's quite a substantial change from your current will," he said carefully. "I know. May I ask what prompted this decision?" "I realized I'd like my money to help people who genuinely need it," I said. "People who are trying to build something, not people who are waiting for me to die so they can have more." Robert was quiet for a long moment, studying my face. "Did Marcus say something to you?" "Marcus said quite a lot, actually. The will was changed and executed by the end of that week. But I wasn't finished. Not even close. The second step required considerably more research, more careful investigation. Marcus worked for a mid-sized investment firm called Brighton Financial Partners. I knew he was proud of his position there, earned good money, had clear ambitions toward eventually making partner. What I didn't know until I did some very careful, very discreet digging, with Victoria's help and her network of industry contacts, was that Brighton Financial Partners was experiencing difficulties. Not catastrophic trouble, not yet, but they'd lost 3 significant clients over the past 18 months. And word within the financial industry, shared quietly among people who pay attention to such things, was that the firm was vulnerable, ripe for acquisition by a larger company or potentially by the right private investors. I called Victoria again. "Hypothetically," I said, keeping my tone casual, "if someone wanted to acquire a controlling interest in a small investment firm, how would they go about doing that?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then Victoria laughed out loud. "Eleanor," she said, and I could hear the delight in her voice. "I've been working in finance for 38 years, and I have been waiting for saw and sigh and sound the mint exact question. The thing about having worked in hospital administration for 3 decades is that you meet people. Lots and lots of people, doctors, yes, but also board members, major donors, investors, executives from pharmaceutical companies and medical equipment manufacturers and insurance companies, people with money and connections and influence. I'd kept in touch with many of them over the years, holiday cards every December, occasional lunches when schedules aligned, professional courtesy and genuine friendship mixed together over decades. Now, I reached out to every single one of those connections, every person I'd ever worked with who might be interested in an investment opportunity, every former colleague who had resources and was looking for something new. It took 7 weeks. 7 weeks of phone calls and meetings and legal consultations and financial reviews that made my head spin. Victoria worked what felt like around the clock, coordinating with 4 other financial advisors and 2 attorneys she brought into the project. My $2.6 million in liquid assets became leverage, became the foundation of something larger. I took out carefully structured loans against my securities. I brought in 3 investment partners, all former colleagues from the hospital who had money to invest and were intrigued by the opportunity, by the potential returns Victoria projected. By mid-December, I owned 52% of Brighton Financial Partners. Marcus had absolutely no idea. Nobody at the firm knew, actually. The acquisition was structured through a limited liability corporation with a deliberately opaque name. The paperwork was Byzantine in its complexity, layers upon layers of legal entities and financial instruments. The previous primary owners of Brighton were thrilled to cash out at a generous valuation. The remaining partners were assured their positions were completely secure. Everything was handled quietly, professionally, discreetly, and entirely legally. I didn't plan to announce it to Marcus. Didn't plan to use it as leverage or threat. I just wanted to have it, to know that I could, to understand my own power in a way I never had before. But then Christmas dinner happened. Marcus and Lauren hosted Christmas dinner as they always did at their house in Minnetonka. All granite countertops and stainless steel appliances and recessed lighting that probably cost more than my first car. Their children, Sophie and Benjamin, 9 and 7 years old respectively, were running around in designer clothes that would be outgrown and discarded within 3 months. We were in the kitchen, just Marcus and me, while Lauren got the children settled at the table for dinner. I was arranging dinner rolls in a basket, trying to be helpful without getting in the way of Lauren's carefully orchestrated meal. "Mom," Marcus said, loading dishwasher pods into the machine. Pods that probably cost more per use than my vacuum cleaner cost per year of service. "Lauren and I have been talking, and we think it might be time for you to start looking at senior living communities." I was holding the bread basket, and I set it down carefully on the counter. "I'm 74, I said evenly, "not 94. We know, we said quickly, holding up his hands. "But these places have waiting lists, years-long waiting lists in some cases. If you get your name in now, you'll have good options when the time actually comes." "When the time comes," I repeated slowly. "And honestly, Mom?" He paused, wiping down the counter unnecessarily. "The house is too much for you. Too much maintenance, too much space for one person. You could sell it, move somewhere more manageable, somewhere with less upkeep, and bank the money. That's $650,000 just sitting there in real estate. $650,000 that's supposed to last me," I said carefully, deliberately echoing his words from November. He missed it entirely, didn't hear his own language coming back at him. "Exactly," he said, nodding. "You'd have that cushion, that security. Or," I said very carefully, "you and Lauren would have that cushion, eventually." He had the grace to look uncomfortable at least. His face flushed slightly. "That's not what I meant, isn't it?" I asked quietly. Lauren called us for dinner before he could formulate a response, her voice cheerful and bright from the dining room. We sat around their table. Custom-made cherry wood that cost more than my first car, more than several of my cars actually, and I watched my son, really observed him in a way I hadn't in years. The way he corrected Sophie's posture and table manners. The way he checked his phone between courses, scrolling through work emails even during a family dinner. The way he talked about his year-end bonus as though it were already a certainty, already deposited in his account. The way he never, not even once, asked me what I wanted, what I needed, what my plans or dreams or desires might be. Dessert was tiramisu, and Lauren had made it herself. It was actually delicious, rich and perfectly balanced. I complimented her sincerely. "Thank you, Eleanor," she said. She'd never called me Mom, had always maintained that slight formal distance. "I got the recipe from this cooking class I've been taking. $320 for the 6-week course, but it's been so worth it." Marcus shot her a look, quick and sharp. She caught it, flushed, looked down at her plate. "That's different," Marcus said to me, even though I hadn't said a single word. "Lauren's investing in a skill, in education." "And I was investing in clean floors," I said mildly. The table went absolutely silent. Even Sophie and Benjamin stopped their quiet bickering and looked up. I set down my fork with deliberate care. "I think it's time I told you something, Marcus." He looked wary suddenly, cautious. "What?" I changed my will. Lauren's eyes went wide. Marcus's face went very, very still, all expression draining from it. "The house is still yours," I continued in that same mild, conversational tone. "But the majority of my assets are going to establish a scholarship foundation for single parents pursuing higher education." "You what?" Marcus's voice came out strangled. $2.2 million, roughly, to help people who are trying to build better lives for themselves and their children. People who are working and studying and sacrificing. Marcus's mouth opened, closed. opened again. "You can't do that." "I can," I said simply. "I did. That's our inheritance," he said, and his voice was rising now. "That's money that's supposed to—" "No," I interrupted gently but firmly. "It's my money. Mine. I earned it, I saved it, I invested it, and when I'm gone, it will help people who genuinely need it." Lauren made a small sound, something between a gasp and a sob. Marcus was standing now, though I couldn't quite pinpoint when he'd gotten to his feet. His chair scraped loudly against the hardwood floor. "This is about the vacuum," he said, his face flushed red. "This is about a vacuum cleaner." "This is about a lot of things," I said. "But yes, the vacuum was certainly part of it. That's insane. You're changing your entire estate plan because I tried to give you financial advice? Because I was concerned about your spending?" "You told me I was being irresponsible with family money," I said, keeping my voice level. "You made it very clear that you see my assets as somehow belonging to you already. So I'm clarifying the situation. They don't belong to you, they're mine. And when I'm gone, they'll help people who actually need them, not people who are already comfortable and simply want more." "You're being spiteful," he said. "I'm being intentional," I corrected. Lauren was crying now, tears running down her face, her carefully applied makeup starting to smudge. Marcus was pacing again, that same agitated movement from before. Sophie and Benjamin had fled to the living room, escaping the tension. I stood up, collected my purse from where I'd set it on the side table. "There's something else you should know," I said. Marcus turned to me, his face still red, his eyes wide. "What else could there possibly be?" "I bought your company." The silence that followed was absolute, total. Even the grandfather clock in the corner seemed to stop ticking. "What?" Marcus whispered. "Brighton Financial Partners. I acquired a controlling interest 4 weeks ago. 52%. I'm the majority shareholder." Marcus sat down heavily, as though his legs had simply stopped working. He gripped the edge of the table. That's impossible." "It's not," I said calmly. "Victoria can send you all the paperwork if you'd like to review it. It's all completely legal and properly documented." "You don't have that kind of money," he said, but his voice was uncertain now. "Actually, I do. I have quite a lot of money, Marcus, considerably more than you apparently realized. I just never felt the need to spend it on things I didn't need or want." I paused deliberately. Like vacuum cleaners I could easily afford. Lauren was staring at me as though I'd suddenly grown a second head, as though I'd transformed into someone completely unrecognizable. "Why?" Marcus whispered, and there was something almost broken in his voice. "Why would you do this?" "Because you made me realize something," I said quietly. "You don't see me as a person anymore. You see me as a resource, an asset to be managed and preserved, money to be protected and eventually inherited. And I decided I didn't particularly like being viewed that way. So you bought my company out of spite?" His voice was rising again. "You bought my entire workplace to punish me?" "No," I said. "I bought your company because it was a sound investment opportunity. Victoria says the fundamentals are strong. With proper management and some strategic changes, it should turn a very healthy profit." I walked toward the door, then turned back one final time. "I'm not firing you if that's what you're worried about. You're good at your job from what I understand, but you might want to start thinking of me as your employer rather than as your inheritance." I left, got in my 12-year-old Camry, which ran perfectly fine despite its age, and drove home through the dark December streets. I wish I could say I felt triumphant in that moment. I wish I could say I felt victorious or satisfied or powerful, but I didn't. I felt tired, old, sad, bone-deep weary in a way that had nothing to do with physical exhaustion. But I also felt something else, something I hadn't experienced in a very long time. I felt seen, recognized, acknowledged as a full human being rather than just somebody's mother, somebody's eventual inheritance. The next 2 weeks were completely silent. Marcus didn't call. Lauren didn't text. Even the children's usual Christmas thank you calls, which had become a pleasant tradition over the years, didn't come. I spent New Year's Eve alone, vacuuming my house with my Shark vacuum cleaner, which worked beautifully, exactly as advertised. The irony wasn't lost on me. Marcus finally called on January 5th. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice quiet, careful. Of course. We met at a coffee shop in St. Paul the next morning. Neutral territory, neither of our homes. He looked terrible when he walked in. Exhausted, older than his 39 years, with dark circles under his eyes and a haggard expression. "I'm sorry," he said once we'd sat down with our coffees. I waited, didn't fill the silence, just looked at him steadily. "I've been thinking about what you said, about how I see you. And you're right." He wrapped both hands around his coffee cup as though trying to absorb its warmth. "I did see you as, I don't know, finite, I guess. Like your job as my mother was done, finished, and now you were just waiting. Waiting to die so you could have my money," I said, not unkindly, just stating it plainly. He flinched, actually physically recoiled. I didn't think of it in exactly those terms, but yeah, essentially. "Yes. Why?" I asked, genuinely curious rather than angry. "Why did you think that way?" He was quiet for a long time, staring down into his coffee. "I think I forgot that you had a life before me, that you gave things up, made choices, sacrificed. I just saw you as Mom, capital M. And moms don't need things of their own, right? They have everything they need because they have us." "That's extraordinarily narcissistic," I said gently. "I know." He rubbed his face with both hands. She's been reading me the riot act for 2 weeks straight. She said I treated you like a trust fund rather than a person." "She's right," I said. "I know she is." He looked up at me. "Rachel said a lot of other things too. Most of them were not particularly flattering to me." I smiled despite myself. "Lauren said that. She said a lot of things. She was furious with me. Still is, actually." He paused. "I don't expect you to change the will back, Mom. I don't even want you to. The scholarship thing is good. It's really good. Meaningful. And honestly, $900,000 is more than generous. It's far more than most people ever inherit." "It's not about generosity," I said. "It's about what I want to do with my life's work, with the money I spent 40 years earning and saving." "I know. I get that now." He paused, took a sip of coffee. "What I don't understand is the company. Why buy it? Why not just, I don't know, cut me off entirely? Disinherit me completely? Why insert yourself into my professional life like that?" I've been asking myself the same question, turning it over in my mind during the long, quiet days between Christmas and now. "Because I wanted you to see me differently," I said finally. "Not as your mother, not as your future inheritance, as a person with capability, with power, with agency and choices." "You wanted to prove you could do it," he said. "No." I shook my head. "I wanted you to understand that I always could have done it. I've always had these capabilities. I just chose not to use them in certain ways because I was busy raising you, supporting you, building a stable life for us." His eyes were wet now, glistening. "I'm an idiot. You're my son," I said gently, "and you made a mistake, a significant one. But we can work with that. Can we?" He looked hopeful and scared simultaneously. "On one condition. Anything. You stop treating my choices like they require your approval or permission," I said firmly. "I'm your mother, yes, but I'm also a 74-year-old woman with my own life, my own money, my own plans and dreams. If I want to buy a vacuum cleaner, or a car, or a company, that's my decision to make, not yours to judge or approve." "Deal," he said immediately. He reached across the small cafe table and took my hand in his, the way he used to when he was small and needed reassurance. "I really am sorry, Mom. Truly." "I know you are. Are you going to stay involved with Brighton Financial?" he asked cautiously. "Or was buying it just about making a point?" "Victoria thinks I should stay involved," I said. "She says I have good instincts for this kind of work. Do you want to?" I considered the question honestly. I think I might, actually. Turns out 40 years of managing hospital budgets and negotiating with insurance companies and overseeing complex financial systems translates quite well to investment firm oversight. Marcus laughed, and it was a real laugh this time, not bitter or forced. You're going to be my boss. My mother is going to be my boss. Technically, I already am your boss, I pointed out. This is completely surreal, he said, shaking his head. This is life, Marcus, real life, and I'm not done living mine yet, not by a long shot. We finished our coffee slowly. We talked about Sophie and Benjamin, about how they were doing in school, about Lauren's cooking classes and her new interest in French cuisine. We talked about Marcus's upcoming performance review at work, and I had to suppress a smile at the strange dynamics of that conversation. We didn't talk about inheritance or money or vacuum cleaners. We just talked like two adults who cared about each other, which felt both foreign and wonderful. When we finally left the cafe, stepping out into the bright January cold, Marcus hugged me. A real hug. The kind he used to give me when he was small and frightened, and I was the only person in the world who could make things better. I love you, Mom, he said into my shoulder. I love you too, I said, holding him tight for a moment before letting go. I drove home in my Camry, which ran perfectly fine despite being old enough to vote, and parked in front of my house. The house I had absolutely no intention of selling or leaving. Inside, the floors were spotless, clean. The vacuum cleaner sat in the hall closet, ready for whenever I needed it next. I made myself a cup of tea and sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd sat 3 months earlier feeling that terrible crack opening in my chest. It wasn't a crack anymore. It had transformed into something else entirely. Space, room, possibility, potential. I pulled out my laptop and sent an email to Victoria. Let's talk about the next investment opportunity, I wrote. I'm interested in exploring other options. I was 74 years old. I had money, I had time, and I had a very good vacuum cleaner. And for the first time in decades, I had a clear sense of my own power, my own agency, my own ability to shape the world around me rather than simply responding to others' expectations. The Scholarship Foundation became real over the following weeks. Robert helped me establish it properly, with a board of directors, clear criteria for recipients, application processes. I recruited 3 other women to serve on the board with me, all former colleagues from the hospital, all women who understood what it meant to work and parent and study simultaneously, often with minimal support. We named it the Margaret Chen Memorial Scholarship Foundation, after my mother, who had worked 2 jobs to put herself through nursing school while raising me alone in the 1960s. It felt right, felt like honoring her sacrifices by helping others in similar situations. The first round of scholarships would be awarded in the fall. We'd fund 20 students initially, covering tuition, books, and a small living stipend. 20 single parents who were working toward degrees, toward better futures, toward breaking cycles of poverty and limitation. Victoria and I met weekly now, going over Brighton Financial's performance, discussing strategy, reviewing the quarterly reports. I discovered I was good at this, genuinely skilled. All those years of hospital administration, of managing competing priorities and limited budgets and complex stakeholder relationships, it had prepared me for exactly this kind of work. I attended my first board meeting at Brighton Financial in late January. I didn't announce myself, didn't make a grand entrance. I simply walked into the conference room with Victoria, took a seat at the table, and introduced myself to the other partners. Eleanor Harrison, I said, shaking hands around the table, majority shareholder. The looks on their faces? Surprise? Confusion? A few calculating reassessments as they tried to figure out who I was and where I'd come from and what I wanted. Marcus sat at the far end of the table, and when our eyes met, he gave me a small nod. Not quite a smile, but something like acknowledgement. Respect, perhaps. The meeting lasted 3 hours. We discussed client retention strategies, market positioning, competitive analysis. I asked questions, lots of questions, some of which clearly made people uncomfortable. But they were good questions, necessary questions, the kind of questions that needed asking. Afterward, one of the senior partners, a man named Gerald, who was probably 65, approached me in the hallway. "That was impressive," he said. "You clearly know what you're doing." "I've been managing complex financial systems for 40 years," I said, "just in a different industry." "We're glad to have you involved," he said, and I could tell he actually meant it. "The firm needs fresh perspective, new energy." Marcus was waiting by the elevator when I finished talking to Gerald. "You did well in there," he said quietly. "Thank you. I mean it. Those were good questions. Important questions we should have been asking months ago." The elevator arrived and we stepped in together. Are we okay?" he asked as the doors closed. "We're getting there," I said. "It's going to take time, Marcus. Trust has to be rebuilt slowly." "I know." He was quiet for a moment. "Lauren wants to invite you to dinner. Actually wants to, not just feels obligated. She wants to apologize properly." "I'd like that. Next Saturday, I'll be there." The dinner the following Saturday was different from Christmas. Better. Lauren had clearly put genuine thought into it. Had made food she knew I enjoyed rather than just showing off culinary skills. Sophie and Benjamin were genuinely happy to see me, ran to hug me when I arrived, showed me their recent school projects and drawings. Lauren pulled me aside before dinner while Marcus was helping the kids wash their hands. "I owe you an apology," she said. I supported his attitude about your spending, about your choices. I should have called him out on it privately. I should have defended you." "You're calling him out on it now," I said. "I've been reading a lot about financial abuse," she said. "About controlling behaviors around money, even in families." What Marcus was doing? It wasn't as extreme as some cases, but it was on that spectrum, and I enabled it. "You recognized it and stopped enabling it," I said. "That counts for something." Dinner was lovely, genuinely warm. We talked and laughed, and Marcus asked about the scholarship foundation with what seemed like real interest. Sophie wanted to know if someday she could help pick scholarship recipients, and the question touched me deeply. "When you're older, absolutely," I told her. "I'd love your help." February brought unexpected developments. Two of Brighton Financial's former clients, the ones who'd left the previous year, reached out about potentially returning. Word had gotten around. Financial industry gossip travels fast. That there was new ownership, new leadership, new direction. Victoria and I met with both clients personally. We presented revised strategies, new approaches, demonstrated the changes we were implementing. Both clients came back. Their accounts represented nearly $4 million in managed assets. Gerald, the senior partner I'd met after that first board meeting, invited me to lunch in early March. We sat in a restaurant overlooking the Mississippi River, ice still visible on the water's surface. "I want to propose something," he said once we'd ordered. "I'm thinking about retiring. I've been at this for 42 years, and I'm tired. But I've been hesitant because I wasn't sure the firm was in good hands." "And now?" I asked. "Now I think it might be," he said. "You've brought something we were missing. Not just capital, though that's helped tremendously, but vision. Strategy. You ask the right questions." "What are you proposing?" "I want to sell you my partnership stake. 15%. It would give you 67% ownership, a clear supermajority. And I want you to take a formal role, not just silent investor, active leadership." I sat back, surprised. "I'm 74 years old, so?" He shrugged. "Warren Buffett's 94 and still running Berkshire Hathaway. Age is just a number if your mind's still sharp. And yours clearly is." "Let me think about it," I said. "Take your time," he said. "But Eleanor, think seriously. You're good at this. Really good." I drove home thinking about his offer, turning it over in my mind from every angle. Did I want this? Did I want to take on formal leadership of an investment firm at my age? Part of me wanted to say no, wanted to maintain my comfortable retirement, my painting classes and book clubs and quiet life. But another part of me, a part that had been dormant for years, was thrilled by the possibility, energized by the challenge. I called Marcus that evening. "Gerald offered to sell me his partnership stake," I told him, "and he wants me to take on a formal leadership role at the firm." There was a long pause. "What did you say?" "I said I'd think about it. I wanted to talk to you first." "Why?" he asked. "It's your decision." Because you work there, I said. Because this would change our professional relationship significantly. I want to know how you feel about it. Another pause, longer this time. Honestly, I think you should do it. I think you'd be amazing at it. The firm needs what you bring. I need what you bring. Perspective. Experience. Questions I don't even know to ask. You're sure? I'm sure, Mom. Take the role. Buy Gerald's steak. Show us all what you're capable of. I met with Victoria the next day and told her about Gerald's offer. She pulled out her calculator and started running numbers before I'd even finished explaining. Do it, she said definitively. Absolutely do it. This is an incredible opportunity. I'm 74, I said again. So what? She looked up from her calculations. Eleanor, you're healthier and sharper than most 50-year-olds I know. You could do this for another 10, 15 years easily. And think about what you could build in that time. I bought Gerald's partnership stake. The paperwork was finalized by the end of March. I became chairman of the board at Brighton Financial Partners, with formal authority over strategic direction and major decisions. My first official act was establishing a mentorship program, pairing younger advisors with experienced ones, creating structures for knowledge transfer and skill development. My second act was implementing new client communication protocols, ensuring regular check-ins and proactive strategy discussions rather than reactive crisis management. The firm's performance improved steadily over the following months. Client retention increased. New clients came on board, drawn by our reputation for thoughtful, personalized service. Revenue grew by 18% in the second quarter. Marcus and I developed a new rhythm, a professional relationship that existed alongside our personal one. At work, I was Chairman Harrison, and he was Marcus Harrison, Senior Investment Advisor. At family dinners, I was Mom, and he was my son. We learned to keep the boundaries clear, to respect both roles. Sophie's 9th birthday came in April, and I attended the party at their house. Watching her blow out candles, surrounded by friends and family, I felt something settle in my chest. Not closure exactly, but resolution. Things had changed between Marcus and me, had broken and been rebuilt into something different but potentially stronger. Lauren caught me after cake, pulled me aside. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what? For not giving up on him. On us. You could have walked away completely after Christmas. Cut us off. But you didn't. He's my son," I said simply. "You're my family. That doesn't just stop even when things are difficult." "Still," she said. "Thank you." The Scholarship Foundation awarded its first round of funding in September. 20 recipients, their faces full of hope and determination and exhaustion. We held a small ceremony, and I spoke briefly about my mother, about working and studying and parenting all at once, about how hard it is and how worthy. One of the recipients, a woman named Jennifer who was 32 and studying to become a nurse while raising 3 children alone, approached me afterward. "This changes everything," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I was going to have to drop out. I couldn't afford tuition and rent both. This changes everything." I hugged her, this stranger who reminded me so much of my younger self, of my mother, of every woman who'd ever tried to build something better, despite impossible odds. "You're going to do amazing things," I told her. "I believe in you." That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea and my laptop, reviewing the scholarship applications we'd received for the next round. Hundreds of them. Far more than we could fund with our current resources. I pulled up my financial accounts, did some calculations. Then I called Victoria, even though it was nearly 9 o'clock. "I want to increase the foundation's funding," I said when she answered. "Significantly." "How significantly?" "Another $1 million," I said. "I want to fund 50 scholarships next year instead of 20. Victoria was quiet for a moment. "That's a substantial commitment, Eleanor." "I know. Can we make it work?" "With some restructuring." Yes, we can make it work." "Good," I said. "Let's do it." I was 74 years old and I was just getting started. The years that followed were unlike anything I'd ever imagined for myself. I'd spent so much of my life planning for a quiet retirement, leisurely mornings, gardening, Maybe watercolor classes at the community center, reading all the books I'd never had time for. Instead, at 74, I found myself running board meetings and reviewing investment portfolios and making decisions that affected dozens of employees and hundreds of clients. And I loved it. Not every moment, of course. There were frustrating days, complicated negotiations, difficult conversations. But the challenge of it, the intellectual engagement, the sense of building something meaningful, it energized me in ways I hadn't felt in decades. Brighton Financial continued to grow under the new leadership structure. By the end of my first full year as chairman, we'd increased our client base by 32% and our assets under management by 41%. We hired 3 new advisors, all young and hungry and brilliant. We expanded our services to include estate planning and tax strategy consulting. Marcus thrived too. Freed from the pressure of waiting for my death to bring him financial security, he threw himself into his work with genuine passion. He was promoted to managing director in his second year, taking on significant leadership responsibilities. We worked together well, surprisingly well, our relationship finding a new equilibrium. The Scholarship Foundation became my deepest source of pride and purpose. By the third year, we were funding 65 students annually. Jennifer, that first recipient I'd met, graduated from nursing school and sent me an invitation to her ceremony. I attended and watched her walk across that stage, diploma in hand, her 3 children cheering from the audience. "I'm working at Children's Hospital," she told me afterward, "starting next month." I never imagined this would be possible. "You did this," I told her. "You put in the work. The scholarship just opened a door, you walked through it." But she shook her head. "You gave me the chance when I'd run out of chances. That matters." I started receiving letters from scholarship recipients. Dozens of them, then hundreds. Story of struggles and triumphs, of late-night studying and balancing childcare and coursework, of graduations and new jobs and breaking cycles of poverty. I kept every single letter in a filing cabinet in my home office, organized chronologically. Sometimes, late at night, I'd pull them out and read through them, and I'd think about that vacuum cleaner, about how a $379 purchase had somehow catalyzed this entire transformation, about how Marcus's judgment and assumptions had cracked something open that had been sealed for too long. My relationship with Sophie and Benjamin deepened over those years. They were older now, more capable of real conversations, and I made time for them regularly. Saturday morning breakfasts became our tradition. Just the 3 of us at a diner near my house, pancakes and scrambled eggs and unhurried conversation. Sophie, in particular, showed a keen interest in finance and business. At 12 years old, she asked if she could attend a board meeting at Brighton Financial, just to observe. I cleared it with the other partners and brought her along. She sat in the corner with a notebook, taking careful notes, asking perceptive questions during breaks. "I think I want to do what you do, Grandma," she told me on the drive home. "Help people with money. Make it grow." "You'd be excellent at it," I said. "Will you teach me?" she asked. "Absolutely," I said. "We'll start whenever you want." We began meeting bi-weekly at my house. I taught her about compound interest and diversification and risk assessment. She was a quick study, sharp and curious, and unafraid to ask questions. Marcus joked that she was already better at financial analysis than half his team. Benjamin was different, more interested in art and music than business. But he'd sit with me sometimes while I worked, sketching in his notebook while I reviewed reports. Comfortable in the quiet companionship. Those moments felt precious. Not because we were doing anything particularly meaningful, but because we were simply being together without agenda or expectation. Lauren and I developed our own relationship too, separate from Marcus and the children. We started having monthly lunches, just the 2 of us. She confided in me about her marriage, about the pressures of maintaining their lifestyle, about her own dreams that she'd set aside. "I wanted to be a chef," she told me one afternoon over salads downtown. "Before I met Marcus, I was in culinary school. But then we got serious, and it seemed impractical. The hours, the pay, it didn't fit with the life we were building." "It's not too late," I said. She laughed, but it was bitter. "I'm 41, Eleanor. That ship has sailed. I started running an investment firm at 74, I pointed out. I don't think ships sail as definitively as we convince ourselves they do. She was quiet for a moment, considering. What would I even do? Start over completely? Maybe, I said. Or maybe find a way to incorporate it into your life now. Cooking classes that you teach instead of take. A catering business on the side. A food blog. Something that feeds that passion without requiring you to blow up your entire life. 6 months later, Lauren launched a high-end catering company specializing in French cuisine. She started small, doing dinner parties for friends, but word spread. By the end of the first year, she had a waiting list and was considering hiring help. "Thank you," she said when I attended one of her events. A beautifully executed 8-course meal for 12 people. For encouraging me. For showing me it wasn't too late. "You did all the work," I said. "I just asked a question." My 78th birthday fell on a Sunday in June. I'd planned to spend it quietly, maybe invite Marcus and his family for a simple dinner. Instead, they surprised me with a party. Not a huge production, just intimate and thoughtful. Family and close friends, the board members from the Scholarship Foundation, a few colleagues from Brighton Financial, Victoria, of course. They'd rented space at a restaurant I loved, set up photos from throughout my life. Me as a young hospital administrator, me with Marcus as a baby, me accepting an award from the hospital board, recent photos from scholarship ceremonies and board meetings. Marcus gave a speech that made me cry. He talked about the vacuum cleaner incident, about how ashamed he felt looking back on it, about what I'd taught him through my response. "My mother showed me that it's never too late to claim your power," he said. "That age is just a number when your mind and heart are still fully engaged. That the third act of life can be the most meaningful one." Sophie presented me with a bound book. "We collected letters," she explained, "from all your scholarship recipients, everyone you've helped. We wanted you to see the impact you've made." I opened it that night at home, sitting in my favorite chair with a cup of tea. Hundreds of letters, carefully compiled and organized. Stories of changed lives, of opportunities that wouldn't have existed without the foundation. Photos of graduations, of new jobs, of children whose futures had brightened because their parents could pursue education. On the last page, Sophie had written her own letter. "Dear Grandma, you taught me that power isn't about making other people smaller. It's about making yourself bigger. About taking up space you've earned. About using resources to create opportunities. I want to be like you when I grow up. Actually, I want to be like you right now. Love, Sophie." I closed the book and sat in the quiet of my house, surrounded by the life I'd built. The vacuum cleaner, now 5 years old, still worked perfectly and sat in its usual spot in the hall closet. The kitchen table where I'd sat after Marcus's initial judgment still anchored my kitchen. But everything else had transformed. Brighton Financial was thriving. The Scholarship Foundation was changing lives. My relationship with my son had been broken down and rebuilt into something more honest, more respectful. My grandchildren knew me as a whole person, not just as a grandmother. I had purpose and challenge and meaningful work. I thought about the Eleanor who'd sat at this table 5 years ago, feeling that terrible crack in her chest, feeling dismissed and diminished and reduced to nothing more than a future inheritance. I wished I could go back and tell her what was coming, tell her that the pain would lead to transformation, that standing up for herself would open doors she hadn't even known existed. But maybe she wouldn't have believed me. Maybe she needed to walk through it herself, make those choices in real time, discover her own strength through using it. The annual scholarship ceremony came around again in September. We were funding 85 students now, the foundation having grown beyond anything I'd initially imagined. I stood at the podium, looking out at 85 faces full of hope and exhaustion and determination, and I thought about my mother, about how she would have loved this, would have understood it completely. My mother worked 2 jobs to put herself through nursing school while raising me alone, I told them. She taught me that education is the most powerful tool for transformation we have, not just for ourselves, but for our children, our families, our communities. You're not just changing your own lives by pursuing your education, you're changing the trajectory of your children's lives. You're modeling resilience and determination and the belief that better is possible. After the ceremony, a young man named David approached me, 26 years old, studying computer science while raising 2 daughters alone after his wife had died in a car accident. "I was going to drop out," he said. "I'd run the numbers every which way, and they didn't work. I couldn't afford tuition and childcare both. And then I got the letter about the scholarship and—" He paused, overcome with emotion. "You saved my life. You saved my daughters' futures." "You're going to do remarkable things," I told him, the same thing I told every recipient I met. "I believe in you." That night, Marcus called. "Mom, I watched the video Lauren took of your speech today. It was beautiful." "Thank you, sweetheart. I've been thinking," he said, "about the foundation, about expansion. What if we took it national? What if we partnered with other organizations, created chapters in other states?" "That would require significant additional funding," I said. "I know, and I want to contribute. Lauren and I have talked about it. We want to donate $250,000 to the foundation to help with expansion." I was quiet for a moment, surprised and touched. "Marcus, that's incredibly generous. It's the least I can do," he said. "After everything, after what you've built, I want to be part of it. Really part of it, not just benefiting from it." We talked for an hour about possibilities, about structure, about vision for growth. It felt like a conversation between equals, between partners, between two people who respected each other's capabilities and judgment. After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and started drafting plans for national expansion. It was nearly midnight when I finally closed my computer, stretching my back, feeling the pleasant exhaustion of deep engagement with meaningful work. I was 78 years old. I ran an investment firm. I oversaw a scholarship foundation that had changed hundreds of lives. I had a vacuum cleaner that worked beautifully. I had a son who finally saw me as a full human being. I had grandchildren who wanted to learn from me. I had purpose and passion and plans for the future. The house was quiet around me. The same house Marcus had once suggested I should sell. That was too much for me. But it wasn't too much. It was exactly right. It was mine, paid for with my work and my choices, filled with my memories and my life. I thought about that moment in November 5 years ago, when Marcus had looked at my vacuum cleaner receipt with such judgment and disapproval. How that single moment had cracked something open, had forced me to see how I'd been diminished, had catalyzed everything that followed. Sometimes the smallest things break us open in the most necessary ways. Sometimes judgment reveals exactly what we need to see. Sometimes the third act of life, the part we're told should be quiet and careful and small, turns out to be the most expansive, the most powerful, the most authentically ours. I made myself a cup of tea and carried it to the living room, settling into my favorite chair with the book of letters from scholarship recipients. I opened it randomly and then read another and another. Stories of transformation, of possibility, of lives rebuilt and futures reimagined. Outside, the September night was cool and clear. Inside, I was warm and purposeful and completely, entirely myself. At 78, I was just hitting my stride, and I had no intention of slowing down anytime soon. After all, I had money, I had time, I had plans, and I had a vacuum cleaner that still worked perfectly. What more could a woman possibly need? Everything else? Everything that truly mattered. I was building myself, one decision at a time, one boundary honored, one possibility embraced, and it was extraordinary. I was extraordinary. Not because of what I owned or what I'd accumulated, but because I'd finally learned to see my own value, claim my own power, and use both in service of something larger than myself. The vacuum cleaner incident had taught me the most important lesson of my life, that it's never too late to become who you were always meant to be. That age is just a number when your spirit is still hungry for challenge and growth. That the people who try to diminish you are really just revealing their own limitations, their own fears, their own smallness. And that standing up for yourself, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it costs you something, even when it transforms everything, that's not selfishness. That's self-respect. and it's the foundation on which everything worthwhile is built. I finished my tea and placed the cup carefully on the side table. Tomorrow I had a board meeting at Brighton Financial. Friday I was interviewing candidates for the foundation's expanded staff. Saturday morning I had breakfast with Sophie and Benjamin. Sunday I was having dinner with Marcus and Lauren. My calendar was full. My purpose was clear. My life was mine. And it all started with a vacuum cleaner. Funny how the universe works sometimes. Funny how the smallest moments of conflict can crack us open in exactly the ways we need. Funny how being underestimated can become the greatest gift if we choose to prove the underestimation wrong, not out of spite, but out of self-knowledge. I was 78 years old, and I had never been more fully alive, more completely myself, more aware of my own capabilities and power, and I was just getting started. The best was yet to come.